Hi everyone, Simon Foster here, Festival Director of the Sydney Science Fiction Film Festival. It is the first year of our screenplay competition and we have lucked out with some of the most learned minds in the world of science fiction, literature and filmmaking and all aspects of the business. First and foremost amongst them, and she won't mind me saying that, is Margaret MacDonald, who joins us now for a chat about her trilogy of books, two of which are already on shelf, The Phoenix Effect. Margaret, first of all, thank you so much for being one of our learned judges, as I put it, and thanks for joining us here on for a bit of a chat before the festival.
Thank you for putting me on the panel and calling me learned.
Let's start with a little Phoenix Effect 101. Tell us about the story of Lia and Arin and the worlds that they inhabit.
Well, Phoenix Effect takes place in an alternative world to ours, one in which healing nanotechnology has allowed for curing diseases, healing any injury, virtual immortality, but it comes with the suppression of human emotion. So basically the inability to feel strongly in any one way or the other. And it's divided this world amongst the people who embrace the technology, who have, essentially all the best land and an indefeatable army as a result of their strength, and the people who've rejected the technology, seeing it as inhuman, as wrong. And they've been pushed to the rural fringes of the world where life is rather harsh, and kind of like put, on the outcast fringes of society. And the story begins when Lia and Arin find each other as adults on opposite sides of this world. They've been childhood sweethearts. They've had this deep connection in their past. And when they encounter each other again, they realize they're enemies. So the Reuniting, which is the title moment of the first book and the pivotal moment of this entire series, the reuniting of these two characters and the confrontation they have to have with their differences and the decision they have to make from that point forward, kicks off this massive 20-year saga, where that moment has actually become influential in the evolution of the world from that point forward. And the 20-year saga as well also explores the past, how they got to that point, how all these characters have gotten to this point, how the world has gotten to this point, and where that arc takes them from there.
It's got such a vast and complex piece of construction about it, and it's a beautifully sort of balanced book in the way it sort of shows the many elements of this new world, but also obviously speaks to the issues that are impacting the modern world that we live in as well. What were the origins of this story? Was the initial concept for this multi-book arc?
The origin is actually, it first began with that pivotal moment, that reuniting moment. I imagined these two fierce soldiers in battle having that moment of realization that they've got this deep connection to each other and trying to decide what to do at that point. Are they enemies or are they not? So it evolved out of the human story, and the world in which they both lived sort of just expanded from that moment and constructed from that moment, as well as all the other characters and all of their arcs. And when I first wrote it, it was a feature-length screenplay. So it was a feature. It was a sci-fi action feature, and it was actually my first award-winning screenplay, which was great because I had just started writing, and so to win a couple of awards was, good feedback, good encouragement to be like, oh, okay, maybe I've got something here. And it always ended with a hook. It always ended with a promise of there's more to come. There's mystery to be unraveled. There's more drama to be had. And once the screenplay was finished, the story kind of continued to expand in my mind and essentially tell itself to me. And some of it was events that happened after the initial screenplay. Some of it was things that had happened before, origin stories of the individual characters and events in the world. And Some of these moments were disconnected, some of them told their own little arcs. So I continued to develop it as a TV series.
Oh, wow.
And it was a story that I went back to over and over again over many years. I'd write something else or work on another project. I'd go back to this world. I'd go back to these characters. I'd revisit them, and it continued to expand the story. And it eventually reached the point where it was so expansive, and as far as production goes, so expensive that I was like, I knew that the odds of it getting out into the world in that form, in that film TV space where it would be like, Game of Thrones level budget,
Sure. Yep.
were very slim. But I wanted to share this story because I love it. I love it. The reason my brain keeps going back to it is because I love this world. I love these characters. I love the adventure that it goes on. I love the action of it. So I thought, okay, I'll try writing a novel.
Sure.
And I took what was the first screenplay and I wrote it into a novel with the promise of like, this can be a novel series. And just thought, let's see if it'll work. And within a year, I had a publication contract for a series.
Oh,
so
wow.
It became the kind of, the natural way that this story wanted to get out into the world.
One of the great joys of the book is you have this writing style that conveys a very vivid sense of place. The environments of the Phoenix Effects are very dense and detailed and very beautiful. Tell us about the joy of world building in your writing. You absolutely nail the human elements, the Lia and Arin, and the ensemble of characters in there are engaging, of course, but also the worlds in which they inhabit is wonderful. Tell us about doing that in literature form, in writing.
Well, I think like a lot of people who work in the fantastical space, I was a kid who was very drawn to stories that took me into an alternative world that allowed me to visit a place that had different rules and different possibilities and even a very different texture from our day-to-day world. And when I first started working in film, it was as a production designer, because when I realized that I could be the person who literally created those worlds, that was like a job, I was like, oh, sign me up. I'm going to do that. And it evolved into writing because, that's the origin point of any new world,
Sure.
the creation of it from the page. So I've always been drawn to kind of like the cinematic experience of entering a new world.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm a very visual thinker, so I very much see these things in my head, and it's kind of a matter of like translating it to the experience level, like letting someone else's eyes see what you're seeing, but also in novel writing, you're experiencing this world through the perspective of a character. So you are actually kind of like, you're in their head, you're with them as they're entering this world, experiencing it. So it's something that I love doing. I want to make an immersive experience for people. And the Phoenix Effect in particular, the evolution of the world is very complex, and the nanotechnology has this complex way in which it works. And when I first started writing it, I wrote a preface because I was like, oh, maybe I need to explain this world. And then I thought, no, firstly, that's cheating. That's kind of like using like the voiceover at the beginning of the sci-fi movie. Like sometimes a word, sometimes you're just
or when they put the
people
map at the front of the book, when you open, there's a map drawn in there, like the old pirate stories.
Yeah. So I was like, well, firstly, it's cheating, but also it's kind of like it's taking away from the notion of immersing yourself in this world. It's kind of like saying like, oh, if you have this academic knowledge of how it all functions, then you're kind of approaching it like a sociological professor, right?
Sure.
Like looking at like a different culture. Whereas if you just enter this world through the characters, you figure out what they know because they happen to know it. You learn what they don't know as they learn it. So it becomes a world you can enter through the people who are in it.
Looking over your terrific website, your work has embraced sci-fi, of course, also horror. Your short film, The Writer, won the Audience Award at the recent Night of Horror Film Festival here in Sydney. The thriller elements are all there. You have a love for this genre space, clearly. Who are the writers or the artists or the filmmakers that have influenced, continue to influence and inspire you?
There's probably so many.
I know, it's a stupid question. There's so many, but yeah, give us your best five.
Well, I think I mean genre blending and sort of like mixing these conventions in unusual ways is something I absolutely love doing, and I love taking on the challenge of like you have your kind of expected way in which a thriller story is going to play out, but then you want to put something funny into it. I love challenging that sort of anticipation,
Yeah.
and I think, I mean, it would come from influences that were all over the place. Like I was reading Ray Bradbury at the same time that I was reading Diana Wynne Jones. So I was reading these like, you know, really kind of dark, scary stories at the same time that I was reading about you know, children who live in worlds with like, you know, magic and different universes and kind of go on these friendly, wonderful, whimsical adventures together. I would have been watching Twilight Zone at the same time I was watching I Love Lucy.
We're on the same page now. This all sounds good to me.
Tim Burton's early films, hugely influential for me. I think it was a lot of his world building that drew me to want to be in film and to want to be a production designer to begin with.
Yep.
And I mean, I love things like The X-Files, and my favorite episodes, my favorite writers on the show were always the ones who took you through sort of like a thriller monster story, but did it with a sense of humor and these little twists of the unexpected. So I think every time I see that or every time I read that, I kind of like absorb a little bit of it.
Yeah. Great answer. All great influences. And yes, of mine as well. I would have said the same thing. Filmmaking and your work in the film space is obviously a very collaborative storytelling form. Yes, as the director, you're overseeing it, and as the writer, you've created it. But there's a lot of visions that go into making a single film vision. Novel writing is not. You're sitting there when you have to put, you know, words to paper. It's you and a keyboard. How do you bridge these two disciplines? Which do you enjoy most? What aspects are the most challenging?
It's funny because I think you've touched on the two main differences that actually make me sort of attracted to both of them.
Okay.
The process always starts the same way. It's you and your brain and your words. And when you're putting your words on the page, the possibilities are endless. You can make whatever you want. I mean, that process is always really wonderful. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, in novel writing, even with the influences of a publisher giving you notes and having to, you know, fit a certain word count or certain genre conventions, or, you know, the idea of marketing to a particular audience, it still is for the most part you and your words and you and your brain and in your creation. So it is you in a room with your own thoughts the entire time.
Yep.
Whereas once you've created the screenplay, if you want to turn it into a film, yeah, it's this massive collaborative, you know, takes anywhere from a small village to a small city of people to create.
Yeah.
And that process can be very frustrating because I think it's very easy for outside influences, be they other voices or things as simple as like budget, to steer a project off the rails or sort of push it in the wrong direction. But that process can also be really exciting because you have all these creative minds and you have all these different talents coming together to create something. And if you're all sort of pushing towards the same goal and you're all kind of contributing your unique talents, it shapes and influences and changes what that film becomes from what it was on, you know, in your head when you first wrote it to what it ultimately is on the screen.
Yeah.
But those changes and those different shapes that it takes and those little kind of twists and turns can be really exciting. And it adds like a real depth and a real richness and a real texture to what the film is that you probably wouldn't have got if it was just you and your brain, and that was the only thing creating it. So I think that collaborative process, and I think the fact that it's as frustrating and as exhausting as it can be, is also it creates new and exciting things.
Is its own energy. Yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I go back and forth between wanting to do one or the other, like, because filmmaking is really exhausting. Like it's a physical output, it's emotional output, it's social output, it's people management, it's like stress. It's so much that that when I'm done with a film, I kind of just want to be alone in a room for an extended period of time and like have like no one talk to me. But then when I've just been writing for a while, I kind of like crave that energy again, that being on set, being with a lot of people, having them throw ideas around, having them try this, try that. Yeah, I find myself wanting, like really craving that, going back and forth. And it's been over a year now since I've been on set, and I've been working solely on the Phoenix Effect novels throughout that year. So now my brain is like, oh, maybe you've got some ideas for another film. Maybe it's time to go make another.
Any insight, anything you can give us? Have you got any sort of early stage work you can share with us? What's next for you?
It's percolating. It's percolating at the moment. But I'm interested in doing another series that sort of experiments with telling stories from two different perspectives. So seeing the same story, two different ways.
Interesting. Bit of Rashomon. Love it. That's good. You've got this classic sort of multi-hyphenate sort of work ethic. Like we've talked about, you're filming and doing the writing, your design background. You're part of the team that runs the Disorder Gallery space here in Sydney, which has got a great website. I'm going to buy some of your posters for sure.
Yeah.
How do all of those help define your quote unquote creative energy? What are all these outlets affording you as an artist and storyteller that you couldn't live without?
Ooh, I think one art inevitably influences the other. I think diving into the world of writing novels has actually made me a better screenwriter. Okay. Because as soon as I started writing in a voice that allowed me to explore my character's inner world, and their emotions and their thoughts and feelings, it told me how differently they would behave on the surface than I thought they would. And that's the art of creating subtext. Yeah. As soon as I was able to put the subtext in the text, I realized how little of it would actually be in the text, if that makes sense.
It does, kind of. Yes.
And then through the gallery, having met all these different artists who are working in all these different mediums and who are finding influence from different places, and talking to them about their work and telling them about my work, is kind of like, it just expands your base of understanding of where influences come from and how we sort of process what we experience and what kind of outlets people explore. It's really interesting to talk to people about, what is it that made them want to create the thing that they created. And the stories behind any kind of artwork, be it, a film or, an amazing painting, or there's something really sort of beautiful about being able to get that human connection between like, why we do what we do as artists, like why we have this yen to create, and why we create what we do.
Yeah, How has it been being a judge on our unproduced short film screenplay competition? The first time we've ever done that as part of the Sydney Science Fiction Film Festival, and you've got this great team around you. I haven't seen everyone's final sort of word on the submitted screenplays. As we record this, it's actually cut-off date today for submissions. So I guess we'll go through and have a final run through soon. But how's it been sitting there feeling superior, going, "Oh, I'm much better than this"?
Oh my God, I hope that's not how my how my scores came across.
Not at all. No, like I said, I haven't really sort of dipped into the science fiction judging yet, but is it something you've enjoyed doing? Please say yes.
Oh yes, yes, I have, because actually I love reading other people's writing, and I love
Right.
seeing other people's ideas and seeing other people's styles. You know, some of which I enjoyed, some of which not so much, but for the most part, that I quite enjoyed reading the scripts that I found to be surprising, because I think they took some risks. They added a few sort of twists and turns and aspects that you don't always see in short films, because I think short film is a genre where people aren't necessarily being extreme in their sort of cinematic approach, or they want to, they often want to write a short film that's easy to make,
Sure.
as opposed to writing something that's a little bit out there and a little bit crazy and would probably involve some tricky production. And I liked seeing that these films, you know, that they created really interesting worlds and interesting twists and turns, and a
That's
few creatures and things like that.
that's interesting to hear, because, and I'm going a bit off script here, but the submissions that we've had, and we've had about 250 films submitted this year, which has been very good. There is I don't know whether this is sort of the byproduct of the COVID period, but there's been a lot of very introspective, a lot of very personal films, a real lack of the good old-fashioned sort of ray guns and spaceships kind of sci-fi. There's a lot of really personal stories that use sci-fi to tell, you know, very personal, very introspective kind of stories. I'm sort of talking in circles here, but it's going to be an interesting program to put together, and we're only a couple of sessions away from locking it off, and it's going to be a very different looking science fiction film festival this year, which I'm really excited about.
That's interesting, and I have no doubt that for a lot of filmmakers, it's probably a heavy Black Mirror influence. This idea of, you know, we have this aspect of the world, this technological aspect of the world that makes this possible, but then exploring it through like a really human story.
Yep.
And I think that's what great sci-fi that stands the test of time does, is it presents a what if, but then it explores it through a human experience, whether it's focused on one character or a small group of characters. It's like you've got this you know, great big world scenario, but you're not looking at it through the entire world. You're seeing it through this little microcosm of human experience. But
Sure.
but it was quite different in the short screenplays. I have to say that there is there is some monsters and ray guns and that kind of thing, which I quite enjoyed, because it reminded me of retro sci-fi
Sure.
monster flicks and an era when people were sort of really experimenting with filmmaking and saying, like, what happens if we try this?
Yeah.
How are we going to make that? Let's figure it out as we go along, which I think is quite fun.
You have been one of my favorite interviews. Your answers have been lovely. It's been so good talking to you. Margaret MacDonald, thank you for being a judge as part of our festival this year. I of course, it's an open invite to all our sessions when we have the festival, September 20 to 22. So I hope to see you there, certainly for opening night, where I'll buy you a shandy or something, which would be nice. So
Nice.
we can see your, please visit the website, everyone, immmagination. Is that .com?
Yeah.
Is that
It's
the best way to say?
imagination with 3 M's, because that's the Margaret M. MacDonald. The M's are, you know, in my branding. Yeah.
That's the brand. All right. Listen, thank you so much for talking with us. The Phoenix Effect parts 1 and 2 is available where all good books are sold and online, I imagine, at this stage.
Yes, and if you are in Australia, you can get a signed copy through disordergallery.com.
Wonderful. I'll put all the links down below when I get this up on site. So thank you so much,
Yeah.
Margaret. It's lovely talking to you.
Thank you.